You are listening to the Kinetic Man Podcast. I'm Stuart.
And I'm David, and we want to walk with you on the journey to living a life defined by uncommon action that is full of purpose, adventure, and meaningful relationships. Our goal is to refine our why while helping you find yours, and together achieve our best and highest purpose. In the end, we'll drive each other to leave the potential life behind and become kinetic men.
What's up, everybody? Hey, this is Stu. And John Mark Comer, one of my favorite authors and podcast hosts, said once that one of the main jobs of a parent is to study your children and help unfold them into the man or woman that God made them to be. I think that we do this through asking good questions and engaging in conversation. I don't know about you, but I've asked my kids before, like, "Hey, how was your day?" And their standard answer is good or fine, and that doesn't get very far. So in the Kinetic Man Mastermind, we challenge men to ask good questions and to engage in conversations so we can get to know our kids better. So what we did was come up with 100 questions. We came up with a list of really good questions to ask that will engage in conversation with your kids, and they're awesome. Here's an example of one. If you wanted to make everyone on the planet smile, how would you do it? Or if you had a time machine, where would you go and why? You'll be amazed at this conversation that you have with your kids when you ask these good questions. Ask them in the car when you're taking them to school. Ask them around the dinner table. Engage in that and be ready to answer those yourself. You'll be amazed at what happens. If you like this list, you can email us. Email takeaction@thekineticman.com. Again, that's takeaction@thekineticman.com, and we'll send you that list of questions for free. Put 100 questions in the subject, and we'll send it right over. Take action, engage with your family, ask good questions. See ya.
Men, Kinetic Men retreats. If you've not been to one, we're on our 4th iteration, September 27 through 29, Empire, Colorado. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. You will come there, one man, you'll leave a changed man. You're going to be surrounded by a group of ninja individuals. You're going to eat. We're going to keep you active so that you don't get too fat because the food is amazing. You're going to be spoiled with just the level of the retreat. But I'll tell you, it is such a life-changing event that you are absolutely missing out if you do not participate in one of these events. So come join us. Go to thekineticman.com. Sign up. Be different. Be better. Do something. Get it.
All right, here we go. David?
Giddy up.
How are you?
Giddy up. Stuart, Matt, gents. Look at Matt, dude. I just want to say, for those not on video, there's some bald beauty going on right now.
Right on.
It's gonna be a good
I like
interview.
that you called it beauty.
I can tell it's going to be a great interview.
I'm outnumbered today.
You are.
But we do have 3 Naval Academy alumni on this call today. I'm pretty stoked about that.
Beat Army.
That's
Beat
right.
Army.
That's right.
No, that's good. The only thing that can make it better is if you're 0-2. But I mean, 0-5, that's fine. That's I think it's going to be a great combo. And hey, one thing, Matt's a dad. We're just talking. He's a husband. He's got 3 kids. We're talking about our daughters and hitting the age of 12, which is I think a magic number for attitude shifting and there's some things we're experiencing together. But I heard something, and I'm trying to remember where I heard it, but it was. So I'm coaching football, and then I'm watching my daughter excel with this new team that she's on. And we're 0-3 with the football team. Coach 5th graders. If anybody who has daughters who play soccer, man, they're tough. Like they are these 12-year-old girls. They just got to the bigger field, and they are tough, man. Like in one game, I watched 2 girls go down. One broke her wrist, did not want to come out. And then one broke her thumb and did not want to come out of the game. And they're like, we have to take you out of the game. And they're just tough, man. The whole game, they're just battling. And then I contrast that with my 5th grade boys that I coached. And dude, I'll tell you, man, there's a switch that happens. I think it probably is around 7th or 8th grade is what I'm being told. But everything up to that point, every single play, one of these boys is crying and they're down.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with crying. I fully embrace it, but they're literally every single down. Somebody somewhere on the field is hurt, and they just, it's just a funny contrast to see how just these girls will play through anything and these boys will play through nothing. Like, oh, I got some this last game, one of the kids, I got some sweat in my eyes. I'm like, bro, like it's football. Like me and the coaches are always saying it's football. It's football. Like this is football. Like if you don't like to get bumps and bruises, like this is not the
And
game.
this is like tackle football, right?
Tackle
Like
football,
with
full
pads.
tackle,
Okay.
all out tackle football. That's what I'm coaching. Anyways, I'm trying to remember as a resource. I wish I could remember it as a resource. Who said it? But one of the whoever I was listening to, I think it was a podcast. He said, one of the things you should do as a dad is just tell your kid how much you love seeing them play.
Totally.
Like that's it. Like don't get into the tactics and this and that. Just tell them, just take a moment, be like, I love watching you play. And so it really has been something, but I'll tell you what's interesting. So the whole point of this is this weekend, and what I love about this conversation, I think we're going to get into, is the power of mindset, the power of choosing a different path or choosing something to think about and putting words to that, and then what happens internally. And so I decided to do that. And what happened when I was watching my daughter play, and then it was too late for my for the boys because I was super frustrated in our third loss. But I found myself thoroughly enjoying watching my daughter play soccer. And it had nothing to do with the wins or losses, the goals, any of that kind of stuff. I was just watching her in the mindset of, I just love watching you play. And it was really interesting. It was pretty fascinating because it changed my entire outlook on the game. And as a dad, I felt great pride just watching her play. And it's pretty cool. It was a pretty cool experience for me. So I'm trying to lean into that as a coach. And this upcoming Saturday, I imagine we might get smoked again. But if I focus on these boys and be like, I love watching you guys play football, it may change my attitude.
Maybe we need to change out some coaching, maybe, or the head
it might be a
coach.
change at the top.
Yeah.
I did not anticipate being the head coach of his football team this year.
Now it's excuses.
Oftentimes we find ourselves with these opportunities, not excuses, opportunities.
There you go.
That we may not be fully prepared for. And we embrace the challenge and jump in both feet, especially where our kids are involved. So,
I think you're on the right track. It's making me think of this. We had like a team meeting for my daughter's soccer. So I have 3 daughters, a 12, a 9, and an 8-year-old, and all 3 of them huge into soccer. And the coach lined all the parents up, and he's like, "Hey, look, I've got this article right here, and what do you think it says for the start of a soccer season?" It's like, it's an interview for the kids. What's your favorite part about playing soccer? And the kids are like, oh, I get to go out and play with my friends and we run around the field together. And then it's like, what's the worst part about playing soccer? And it's like 100%. All the kids are like, the ride home with my parents when I play.
It's pretty fascinating though, man. Like we really need, what I do remember, it was Matt Madsen, Stu, on our hike. He's the one that said that. Amazing interview that we had in the past. We went on a hike recently. He's the one that said that. He said, "Hey man, try this and just try this on." And it didn't hit me until this weekend. But you make a great point, Matt. And I think in general, and I'm curious, this will go into our conversation about, everything you're doing, but I'm curious because us as adults have lost such a sense of potentially identity, but have lost this, especially men. We have lost our tendency to be in community. We've lost our, a lot of us have no friends, right? We've lost this idea of a tribe, which is so ingrained in how we're created, that we put a huge overemphasis on things that really truly don't matter, like how many goals our 8-year-old daughter scores, right? Like there's an inordinate amount of, and it's a completely unbalanced amount of stress, pressure, but also like meaning. We've talked about this, Stu, recently, about how much meaning we put into our kids' performance. And it's like, wow, do you really not have anything more? Like, is this truly, and just remember when you were a kid, dads, like you sucked at sports, dude. You weren't even like, who are you to judge? So it's just interesting. I'm curious, I want to hear, introduce yourself and tell us a little about yourself, but but I'm going to keep that one, just I'm going to keep that one on the forefront. Is how powerful is it that we've lost this tightness in community and all the things we're doing that has, I'm assuming, has directly led to some of the things that you're seeing in your line. So, anyways, tell us who you are, Matt.
Yeah, man. Hey, don't let me forget to mention a book called Of Boys and Men by Richard Reeves. He's a fellow at Brookings. And I mean it's like gonna be a slam dunk for this conversation. I'm really pumped that this started off like with a sports, and particularly kids sports, like sort of undertone. So yeah, I'm Matt Brown. I went to the Naval Academy, graduated in 2005. Spent like what I would consider a charmed Navy career, for like 12, 13 years. I was on active duty. I got a chance to deploy with the 101st Airborne, go to Iraq. I worked as a fellow for the Chief of Naval Operations, his strategic studies group, for a while. Went to grad school out in Monterey. Got to go to Spain as a department head to live with my family. I had 2 daughters at the time. We had our 3rd daughter while we were over there, so that was just totally magical. And then was lucky enough to get picked up for early command of one of our mine countermeasure ships in San Diego, which was just a remarkable tour, as you might imagine. And then after that, I went to work with Navy Special Warfare in Coronado, doing operations innovation type work. And so you might be like, well, if you liked it so much, why'd you get out? And that is a great question. I left active duty to start a mental health care company. And I did that because while I was at Team 17 in Coronado, I got a phone call. And I don't know, this is like supposed to be my intro, but this is like the story. So is it okay that I just keep talking?
Yeah, dude, let's go.
Okay, cool.
The more you talk, the better. The less talk David has on our show, the better. So.
Can you say that 3 times, Stu? Because you nailed that one.
Yep.
You nailed that.
Uh-huh.
Hey, Matt, I considered it a failure that Stu actually had the opportunity to talk once. So, but please continue.
Got it. Here goes. So I'm on transmit mode. Yeah. So I was at Team 17, and I got a phone call from my old ship, the one that I used to be in command of, and the ship was at sea, and it was the new captain calling me, and he said, "Hey, Matt, I've got some really bad news. Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm sitting down." And at the time, like, you got to like put yourself in the scene here. There's this hotel it's called the Coronado Navy Lodge. It's on the airfield in Coronado, which is like a little piece of heaven. It's this
best ever, dude.
Yeah,
best
it's
ever.
as good as it gets. And so there's like the smell of like barbecue or something or carne asada in the background. I don't even know, but this picturesque beach, and I'm like in heaven. And my good buddy, who used to be my executive officer and is now the captain of the ship, calls me, and he's like, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yeah, man, what's going on?" And he said, "Our man, Arun Somasundaram, went to a Marine Corps exchange, and he bought a 9mm, and he took his own life 2 days ago." And I was absolutely shocked. This is like the most common thing nowadays. Like, you can't even talk to somebody who's been in military service who doesn't know somebody who died by suicide. But this is the type of kid that first generation American. His family was from India. He came to the United States, went to the University of Washington, nuclear trained officer, an absolute all-star. I think he was our first ranked, our number one of sort of officer. And if you would have come on the ship when I was in command and been like, "Hey, Captain, who do I need to worry about?" Like, if you're a chaplain or something, you'd be like, "Who do I need to worry about in terms of mental health?" I would have grabbed Arun and been like, "Hey, man, help me think of somebody." You would never have seen it coming. And so I said, "Man, that's really bad." And so Eric, who's the captain of the ship, he's like, "We're at sea right now. I need you to go to the hospital and sit with his family because they're coming from India." And I said, "I'm happy to do it, brother. I'll be there instantly." So I packed up my stuff and I went to the hospital. And obviously, as you can imagine, his mother was inconsolable. Like, she was like, couldn't communicate effectively. So just being there was sort of the order of the day, just presence. But his dad, his dad kept bringing up over and over again, like a broken record, this team building exercise that I took all of the chiefs and officers on when I was in command. We went to Yosemite National Park and we climbed Cathedral Peaks together. And it was just like this really, I mean, heck, it sounds like a lot like what you guys do with your retreats. It's a very similar thing. It was an opportunity to challenge ourselves together and have this, community. And his dad grabbed me by the shoulders and he shook me like quite violently. And he's like, why didn't I do these things with my son? Why didn't I do these things with my beautiful son? And it's been 5 years since this. And I can't tell the story without getting like a lump in my throat and getting, some heat right here, because you could feel in his voice just like regret and lost time. Like you could feel it all in one moment. And it struck me in a way that like very few things in my life, maybe like seeing the birth of my daughters, getting married, like throwing your hat up in the air at the Naval Academy on graduation day, that sort of like getting hit in your soul. It was that powerful. And so I had this wonderful Navy experience and I thought I was going to be in the Navy forever. But on my drive home, I called my wife, Jen, and I just said, look, we lost Arun. If you start doing, and this was 5 years ago before this mental health thing sort of got in vogue. But I was like, if you just look at the numbers, this is like, if you know how to read a graph, this is not a good graph to be reading. Like it's not just Arun, it's not just my ship, it's not just the Navy or the Department of Defense. This is like a massive epidemic of loneliness and really fractured mental health and well-being, and we got to do something about it. So I think, as foolish as it is, I'm going to start a company, and so that's what we did.
Hey, you said something just a second ago that kind of triggered a question. You said before this mental health thing became in vogue. What do you mean by that?
So 5 years ago, people were talking about it, but it was like, we talk about reducing the stigma to where you're able to like, hey, I tore my ACL and I'm going to go get physical therapy. Now I think people are a hell of a lot more comfortable saying, hey, I've just gone through a reasonably traumatic, incident in my life. I went through a divorce. I went through some sort of financial hardship. I went through the loss of a family member that meant a lot to me growing up. And I'm taking a mental health day, it's not like an indictment on your character to want to like take a deep breath and reset and go through some things in order to bring yourself back to full strength. We didn't talk about it 5 years ago in the way that we're talking about it now. And I think that a lot of people are terrified about like the road we're on. But a part of me, because I look at it every day, I'm actually encouraged because, we're seeing really sophisticated thinkers willing to talk about this stuff. I mean, the Surgeon General right now, Vivek Murthy, he like straight out, he came out and said, the defining healthcare crisis or healthcare public health challenge of our time is the preservation and maintenance of our own mental health and well-being. And you're like, what the hell? Like in an age of COVID and like cardiac disease and like automobile accidents, like this is the thing. And when you look at the numbers, it is the thing. But the silver lining is that like the Surgeon General is willing to talk about it. It's not this like monster under the bed anymore.
Yeah, I love that you brought it up, and I want to make one point and then a question. So you mentioned this whether you call it a mental health day or something, and I think people blow this thing way out of proportion. And what I mean by that is, Stu and I went on a 14er on Thursday.
Nice.
And we were with one of the guys that we were with is a Kinetic Man, and we were just hiking. He's a very insightful. Like, I love talking to this guy, Matt Heron. If you're listening, you're the guy. And a lot of Matts I'm referencing today. We got Matt Madsen, Matt Heron, Matt, strong name, Matthew.
Lots of friends with Matt.
Lots of friends with Matt. But but he challenged me because for me, the 14er was not like, for some people, that's like, that is the outlet, right? Like that's like the joy. For me, it's something to like really get through, to push myself and get through.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. But he said, dude, you talk about fishing and you haven't done it. Why haven't you done it? How many times have you gone this summer? And I'm like, dude, I've not gone once. And you're like, you talk about it being good for your soul. You need to go fishing tomorrow. And the point I mean by blowing this thing out of proportion, fishing for me, not only do I love fly fishing, addicted, but what it really required is I went 10 minutes down the road from my house. I got on Clear Creek. I got in the water for 2 hours before a lunch meeting. And those 2 hours, and this is what I mean by blowing out of proportion. It took 2 hours, and I'll tell you, this was last Friday. I'm still like enjoying the benefits of, I took a couple of pictures of some of the better fish I caught so I could send them to Stu and be like, hey, this is what it looks like to catch fish. But
Yeah, I don't know what that looks like.
So good for my soul. I'm thinking back to it, and I was on the river by myself. I do this by myself often. And I was just literally, I'm a faith guy. I love Jesus. And I was literally just praising God. Like every time I caught a fish, I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Like, this is awesome. Like this beautiful fish, this beautiful creation came out. Thank you so much. And like, my point is all encompassing. It was 2 hours. And it was all encompassing. It was spiritual. It was physical, because I like to hop in rocks, and, I like to be very active when I fish. It was very physical. I was outside, and it was just a beautiful time. And so I really appreciate you saying that, because I would encourage everybody, like, what is that thing? And if you say work, like you're not creative enough, you're lying to yourself. It's not work. All right. Yeah. Like if it's being with somebody or just doing something, identify that thing and just do it for 1 hour, for 2 hours. And it can be huge. And one thing you said, so I want to encourage everybody to do that. But one thing you said that really caught my attention as well, in the description of this crisis, and what you're in every single day, you mentioned a loneliness epidemic. What is that correlation? It guys kind of goes back to how we started this conversation, but can you talk about what you're seeing from the perspective of not having a tribe, not having friends, this loneliness, and then ultimately, dying by suicide and different mental health issues?
Yeah, there's so many good books that I think your listeners would really enjoy. The first one that comes to mind, based on the fly fishing example that you just gave, is it's called Micro Adventure, or Alistair Humphreys is the guy that wrote it, but I can't remember the title of it. But it's basically like having little micro adventures. It's like you don't need to plan a trip to Everest in order to have these moments of fulfillment. You can do exactly like you did, and go 20 minutes from your house to a fly fishing stream. And in fact, the company that I built, it's called Chimney Trail Health. That's what it is encouraging. It's not like an outdoor company per se. It's for sure a healthcare company, but the things that we're encouraging people to do are exactly like this fulfilling experience that you had fishing. So that's the first thing, is that you don't need to do anything elaborate. It can be something quite small, but really fulfilling. The second thought, because we're talking about the epidemic of loneliness, there's a really great book called Bowling Alone. Maybe everybody's heard of that. And you talk about tribe. There's another great book by Sebastian Junger, literally called Tribe, and that's pretty great, because it talks about sort of the galvanizing effect of hardship and how you can like really come together in those moments, and it provides you that community that you'd otherwise not have when you live in a world that has been like paved over for your every convenience. So that the nice thing about like hardship is that you're upending that, and then you're catching around trying to find like a teammate, because you need to figure out how to endure this challenge together. So yeah, those are two good books. But the epidemic of loneliness, I didn't make up that term. That's a Surgeon General's term, and it's because of what you guys have correctly identified. And I think the reason that Kinetic Man exists is to try and reinstate that. People don't go bowling anymore together. They don't go to the Optimists Club or the Moose Lodge. Chimney Trail, the company, also has a foundation, and our foundation, it's called Chimney Trail Foundation, really creative. But what we're doing is we're raising funds to retrofit the veteran service organization locations like American Legions and VFWs and DAVs, and we're retrofitting those buildings, and like with the hope that if you build it, they will come. We're trying to get people to re-engage in those communities because it's a hugely beneficial experience, but people aren't going to go for like dodgy bingo and crappy beer. Like they need something more meaningful than that. And so what we're doing is we're retrofitting these VSO buildings into essentially co-working spaces for veterans that are either launching their own company or they have the opportunity to like work remotely or whatever the case might be. And the idea is that in this co-working environment, there's always going to be a VSO representative that can coach you through how to make sure you're maximizing your VA benefits, coach you through like various veteran related community events that are happening in your neighborhood. Just like, I mean, and there's so many of them. There's more of these buildings than there are Starbucks in the United States. Like they're just everywhere. So it's like a massively wasted resource. But that's it. Like overcoming the epidemic of loneliness, which is probably, I don't know, probably like brought on in large part due to our ability to like teleport into wherever it is that you want to go and then get stuck there.
Connected with our friends. A lot of air quotes there, right? A lot of air quotes. Stu, before your question, I want to make one comment because this has stuck with me for years. There's an old VFW up in the UP of Michigan, and we went there. That it's where all the old dudes and their wives would just go hang out. This little tiny shack in the middle of like it was awesome. But I'll tell you that they had something. It was special. You walked in there and you're like, oh, I wasn't extremely welcome until they're like, oh, you're one of the Swanee boys. My grandpa was Swanson, right? I'm Gutierrez. Right. But when I first walked in, they're like, like the music stops. But my point is, they had like the dollar beer, and there's just a bunch of guys sitting around. The beer was just like a thing, right? It wasn't the focus. And they were just sitting around like hanging out, and they were tight. And it was awesome, multi-generational. It was so cool. So hearing you say that brings back that memory, and that's such an amazing, incredible idea.
Yeah, I mean, so Blake Hogan, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to interview him yet, and if you haven't, he'd be a great guest. He's the CEO of Bunker Labs, which is the like veteran entrepreneurship incubator, like launches, helps you raise money, helps you launch companies, gives you community. Like there's also that's probably the most important element of it, is that it gives you this veteran community, but also like this entrepreneurial community. So it doesn't feel like you're stuck in the past. It's like hey, we're doing really aspirational things. Anyway, he pointed it out to me in a meeting that I was in with him. He's like, not all of them are dingy. He's like, we got to take some of the magic maybe from that UP American Legion or VFW post, or there's a VFW post in Denver, VFW 1. They've like turned that thing into an art gallery. I mean, it's absolutely awesome. And then there's one in Coronado, there's one in Honolulu, there's one in New York City. I mean, there's like some really remarkable examples of how to do this, but it's one of those things. It's like, you have to build it first, because like nobody's going to want to come hang out in a place that's all beat. So you have to like put in the work first. Yeah.
Well, let me I'm just gonna call you out on public recording here and say something that you had said to us before we started recording. And I say it because it was us too. And you're in this entrepreneur world, right? You're in kind of startup mode of building this company. And we had talked about kind of our next retreat, and you kind of said something like, well, all I do is work, right? Like I don't have any friends. I don't have any fun anymore. And so I'll have to like look at my schedule.
I didn't say I don't have any fun anymore.
Oh, okay.
I don't have any friends.
You don't have any friends. All right. Well, hey, and that's a big part of it. And it's funny you say that, because we've talked to other men, and it's kind of the norm. It's kind of the norm. Like the older you get, the the lower amount of like really good friends you have exist. And in our military days, like you'd kind of be forced to have friends. You'd move to a different location. You'd kind of get in connected with the wardroom or the chief's mess or whoever, and those would be your friends for 3 years. And then you'd move again. You'd make new friends, and you'd maybe stay in touch with some of the old friends. But you get into this world of entrepreneurship, and you're starting companies, and you're running your businesses, and you have a family. Like, who has time for friends, right? Who has time for putting some fun on the calendar, right? And that was us. It totally was us. And I'm curious, like, back to this mental health issue and these challenges. I think they go hand in hand. I think they, they're working off of each other to make this place right now where we are having these challenges, where we are having these mental health issues, where we have huge anxiety problems, depression issues, suicide. What can we do about it? And I think I want to lead this into what you're doing with Chimney Trail, and why is this happening?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is that I've been working in this field now for half a decade. So I used to say, hey guys, I'm not an expert. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I've been looking at the same damn problem for the last 5 years. So now I know like what's going on. And it's not like really me. It's that I've essentially put myself through like this weird graduate school of talking to all of our country's best psychiatrists and psychologists. It just happens to be through a different lens. It's through like a market-based lens rather than like pure, pure delightful academic research sort of thing. So the first thing I'll say is that I was totally exaggerating when I say I don't have friends.
Yeah, I know. I'm totally.
Yeah. So you guys, I think, would both be really encouraged to know, we give ourselves a hard time because we don't meet in person as often as we should. In fact, we don't hardly ever. Like the last time that we got together was for a fishing trip. It was my academy roommates. There were like 10 of us that sort of rolled together, and we've stayed in touch and have been very close for the last almost 20 years now. The last time we got together was for my buddy's 40th birthday. It was a fishing trip up in Alcova, Wyoming. And we're like, we're doing it every year. We're definitely, and then it doesn't happen, but the time before that was like my change of command, a few of us got together for another, like one of the buddies just recently had a change of command. He took over a VFA squadron. So a few of us made the trip out, and then another one turned over a Marine intelligence battalion and like didn't even let anybody know that he was turning over. And we talk every day. We're like, what the hell, Tom? So I totally know where you're coming from. It's like the manly bond that you had earlier in life that basically made you who you are. It made you into like the independent adult that you've become. That group, it's almost like you take it for granted. It's like all the rest of this. You're just like, you check in with them as a way of staying on mission in other parts of your life. You don't really think of them as a part of that mission, So I do have friends. Most of them help me with my company. So that's like one of them is an actual co-founder of the company. So that's we stay in touch in that respect. But I don't make new friends. That's for damn sure. And I think that's just a function of like being very focused on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And I would be lying if I didn't say that it was because we put maybe, I don't even know where they come from, but there's it might be part of like the masculine ethos or whatever, but like for me, Chimney Trail must succeed because I'm a provider for my family, and this is not something that can be left to chance. So when it comes to the prioritizations in my life, it's like Jen, the girls, my wife's name is Jen, and then our daughters are Ainsley, Clark, and Nora. So it's Jen, Ainsley, Clark, and Nora, and then Chimney Trail, and then everything else, it's like if you can fit it in. So you guys have heard that speech of like the jar with the big rocks and then the little rocks and then sand. The big rocks just turn into your wife and kids, and then whatever it is you're doing to make ends meet. And then, I don't know whether that's good or bad. I think we could all do better to make your friendships a part of the mission, rather than just like the supporting cast. But I don't have the answers on that.
So how do you think that kind of reflects into the anxiety and the depression and the suicide, and the the officer who said the dad came and said I should have done this more. Like I feel that there's a connection there somehow or another.
So here's a connection. This is what I was saying. I used to say that I'm not an expert, and now I've become one. This is the reason that we are suffering as a society. I don't want to say like we're all suffering, because some people grow up in an environment where they build these coping mechanisms without it being a conscious decision. It's just like good, like good well-being coaching growing up. But clinically speaking, and what Chimney Trail, the company, is based around. So if you identified as somebody who was suffering a destructive level of anxiety or depression, you would say, hey, I think I need to go talk to somebody about this. And then you go to your doctor, and your doctor would make a referral to a psychiatrist, and they would make a referral to a psychiatrist in case you needed to be medicated or in case you needed to be hospitalized or whatever the case might be. And then if the psychiatrist was able to determine that you would respond well to moderate medication and that you would benefit from like continuing to learn about coping tools, they would refer you to a psychologist, like a clinical psychologist. And then you would have a bunch of therapy sessions, right? You'd have like 15 to 25, something like that, therapy sessions. And the first thing that the psychologist would introduce you to is something called cognitive behavioral therapy. And for anybody that is not familiar with what cognitive behavioral therapy is, it is the most clinically vetted and studied, peer-reviewed, all that kind of good stuff, form of psychiatric intervention that exists. And the outcomes are on par with the best medications, independent of medication. So if you're able to maybe use a medication in order to sort of take your brain from like a destructive rut, then you can reinforce it with cognitive behavioral therapy, and it will improve your mental state and your overall well-being. But the psychologist would introduce you to this because it turns out that your feelings, whether they're feelings of pathological anxiety, depression, fear, hate, like whatever, those feelings are not like things unto themselves. A lot of people are like, oh, I feel this way and there's nothing I can do about it. But it turns out that is not true. Your feelings are the result of a thought pattern. Like you cannot have a feeling independent of thought. Like you have to have a cognition in order to have a feeling. And so a lot of times what happens in cognitive behavioral therapy is they'll just say, okay, give us an example of when you were like overly anxious, like whatever the case, or like severely depressed. And it's like, okay, that's the time. Now let's talk about the circumstances that led to that feeling. Give me the thought that you were thinking right before this feeling started to exist in your brain. And you're like, man, this sounds so easy, but it's actually not. You really do need to think a bit in order to like get your brain to remember, okay, a thought caused it. And when you analyze the thought, 9.9 times out of 10, it is like totally off base. It's untethered from reality. It is absolutely illogical. So illogical thought patterns result in these feelings of destructive anxiety and depression. And those illogical thought patterns are not unique to you. They're unique to human beings. And it's like the great, I don't know what the right word, I don't know what the right literary device would be, but it's like, the great irony, I guess it would be, that you need desperately to live in a tribe because we are inherently social creatures. But our learning to live in a tribe, like our ancestral learning to live in the tribe, has created these opportunities in our brain for what the psychologists call cognitive distortions. And so what Chimney Trail does is it calls out those cognitive distortions and it helps you to know about them so that rather than needing to wait until you need a psychologist to coach you through it, you can know about them in advance. And when you know about them in advance, when you start to feel pathological anxiety or depression, you can think, okay, that was probably an illogical thought. Let me analyze it. Okay, what distortion am I suffering from? And then you can overcome it. And like, this is the book. We did this for the Marines. They got like Chimney Trail, like, we just give your listeners an idea. Like, we put these little boxes together, like HelloFresh or Bespoke Post or Stitch Fix. But instead of like clothes and food, it's mental health care in a box. And so you open it up and there's like premium outdoor gear. And then in addition to the premium outdoor gear, that gear facilitates an activity, and the activity is laid out in this book. And we did this book for the U.S. Marines. And this is about it. The activity is really simple. It's like making a time capsule. But the idea is that they do this during boot camp, and then they get to analyze their own cognitive distortions. And when you open the book, it steps you through, like, these are the 10 cognitive distortions. So this is 5 of them. And with this particular activity, we're going to address this one, which is discounting the positive. So the distortions are all or nothing thinking, discounting the positive, emotional reasoning, jumping to conclusions, labeling, magnification and minimization, mental filtering, overgeneralization, personalization and self-blame, and should statements. And so this box addresses 2 of them. Mental filtering is the second.
This is all like, this is, if someone were to Google the 10 distortions or whatever, these same ones would come up.
Yeah, so there are probably an infinite number of cognitive distortions, but the most like the most recurring, the ones that like are like the greatest hits, the cognitive distortions greatest hits are those 10. Like, you can bring somebody from a clinical need down to something that's a much more manageable level of anxiety or depression just by overcoming these 10. And they're like 2 really great books. One is straight up called Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. It's by Dr. Judith Beck. Judith Beck's dad like invented cognitive behavioral therapy, so it's been like studied in the family for a while. And then there's another one that's called Feeling Good, which is kind of a campy title, but it really does make you feel good. It's written by a guy named Dr. David Burns, who is a psychiatrist and professor of psychiatry emeritus at Stanford. So yeah, those are like the cognitive distortion greatest hits. And so what Chimney Trail does now is we create these little activities. We've got a set of 5 activities. Each of the activities an outdoor adventure, just like a fly fishing trip. It's like, anyway, we actually do have an aquatic bugs one for kids. It's like identifying aquatic bugs in their different life stages. And anyway, so we have these 5 boxes. Each box addresses 2 of the 10 cognitive distortions. So by the time that you get through all 5 activities, you've overcome what takes down most people.
And so you're trying to get this to whom? Is this the active duty military? Is this the veteran? Is this the families? Like, who is this for, or is it for everybody?
So eventually it's going to be for everybody, but every business person knows you have to pick your beachhead market, so to speak. Yeah. And our beachhead market is the U.S. Marine Corps and also the Naval Academy. So the first prototypes, we just got this approved for launch. The first kits are going to go out to Marine Air Group 16. We are waiting on their CO to review it. There's a CO requirement because it involves people's personal information. So the CO needs to be like, okay, these guys are not like terrorists, and instead are actually trying to help us. So that COs needs to give the check. But we'll go out and support Marine Air Group 16. And the idea is that they pilot it, but then we ultimately want this to be available at every single point of a session in the military. So whether it's the service academies, ROTC units, boot camps, this is going to be like a part of the training. But it's done, like, every element of it is is the result of 5 years of research. So you might be like, why does it come in a box? And why do you have like outdoor gear associated with it? It comes in a box because we need to extend the curriculum. You need to give people time to overcome the cognitive distortion and then practice it for a few months, and then have them get another thing and practice that for a few months. You need to give people time to like really process it. The other reason it comes in a box is because we want this to be available at boot camp. But then, Stu, to your point, ultimately, we want it to be for families also. Because like when you start boot camp, you're at a dramatically different point in your life than you are when you become a parent or like buy a house or whatever. So as you PCS for the first or second time, we want another box, like another set to go out to you. And then ultimately, we want a set to go out to you when you get your VA benefits. So we're working with the VA right now to pilot a program in southeastern Colorado for the Ute Mountain Indian Reservation, and then the southern southeastern counties in Colorado. But we'll pilot there so that we can do it in a more expanded way with the VA. So it's boxed so that no matter where you go, we can just send it to you. And then it's an outdoor activity, because if you want to get if you want to create an indelible memory or make it something that sticks, you have to get people into an unfamiliar environment, which is why I really love the retreats that you guys do, because it's like you're taking people away from the day to day and you're giving them an opportunity to make this indelible memory. And we use this outdoor gear as sort of for two reasons. One, it gives you the Happy Meal effect. Like this training comes to you in the mail and it's like, oh, some killer gears in here. I'm going to open it up, and that's fun. And then the second part about it is that once you complete the training, then the element, I mean, like, I'll just break the box open. Like inside this box, there's an entrenching tool and like the actual time capsule itself. And so whenever you use the entrenching tool, you're going to be thinking about like discounting the positive and mental filtering. And whenever you look at this like time capsule sitting up on your mantle or whatever, you're like discounting the positive and mental filtering. So these end up becoming what they call sacred artifacts. So it like reorients your thinking and gives you a little reminder, the same way that like tying your tennis shoes reminds you to go for a jog. So anyway, that's the Chimney Trail in a nutshell.
And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a very proactive approach. Like you're basically giving the tool as part of the training, which is a great place to do it, right? You're already in a mind state of whether it's boot camp or whatever, creating these indelible memories and being, whether they're forced or not.
Yeah.
But you're effectively giving the tools, cognitive based therapy tools and know-how, so that when and if you have these issues in the future, you actually have the tools beforehand. It's a very proactive approach. This is not for, which to me is scalable to infinite, right? Because there's nobody that doesn't need this. You're very much like us. People always ask us, hey, is the Kinetic Man a veteran group? Well, no, but we're vets. So like it just kind of naturally that we attract a certain type of person, and that tends to be vets at this point. But for you guys, this literally, like my kids can start plugging in with this.
Yes.
They can start doing these things because it's just a tool set, which I absolutely love about the proactive nature of countering when it's too late, right? And now you have tools. That's pretty awesome. I love that.
Well, and you might like, your next question might be, or it certainly is a lot of times, people are like, well, aren't the psychiatrists and the psychologists like upset you're like replacing them, like Uber replaced cab drivers? And it's like, no, like the psychiatrists and psychologists are the ones that are advancing this. They want it desperately, because there is never going to be, it's like they've done a bunch of studies. You can't make any more SEALs. Like you can put a bajillion people through that training and you'll come out with the same number of SEALs. And it's like the same for psychiatrists and psychologists, because it takes a special like ethos and a deportment in order to survive that career field. There will always be this many people in need of overcoming destructive anxiety and depression. And there will be this many, psychiatrists and psychologists like available to provide themselves as a provider and a resource. So they're like, hey, if we don't need to see you, if you can do this the old fashioned way and like overcome these cognitive distortions, that's just good common sense. Like, education is authorized. Like, let's go do it.
Hey, sorry, Stu, one question
yeah.
I meant to, are these distortions, are they like a passed down generation to generation? Like what is the, is it like an evolutionary just type thing that's just buried in? Like what were they useful at some point for survival, or what's the root of this?
You're onto it, man. They are useful to a certain point. Like, for example, discounting the positive. Let's read the definition of it. So discounting the positive is downplaying or dismissing positive experiences, qualities, or accomplishments while disproportionately emphasizing the negative aspects of a situation. And yes, there are some advantages to knowing how to discount the positive. And a great book that talks about it is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. He talks about our brains operating in prospect theory rather than being rational. And it's like discounting the positive makes sense if you are on it, like in the wilds of Africa, and you're trying to keep your family alive, and you see the sun shining through blades of grass and it makes black stripes. And yes, the probability is that it's sun shining through blades of grass creating those black stripes, but there is a possibility that it's a damn tiger. And so your ancestors like made a right turn and left because it could have been a tiger. And so they were like discounting the positive of like enjoying the sun coming through the grasses, or, so there is, I'm sure, and like people smarter than me, you have to go get some like neuroscientists or whatever. But there are some like evolutionary vestiges that we're having to overcome when you're addressing these cognitive distortions. But to like boil it down, like if you know about them, you gain command over them. And you're able to differentiate between, hey, this is useful and this is useful to me. I'm like using these distortions for forces of good. Or, hey, these are like debilitating me and they're putting me in a position where my blood pressure is skyrocketing because of anxiety, or I can't get out of bed to actually do anything because I'm suffering from like profound depression. So yeah, I think it's hardwired, but we can master it.
And I know we're running short on time, but something that you you kind of discussed and went through, explained the process of someone going through some mental health challenges, and you identify it and you go talk to somebody about it, and they set you up with someone to talk to and do 15 sessions, and then that's kind of it. Well, that happened to me. Like I identified some PTSD. I went to tell somebody, I talked to somebody, they set me up with a therapist. I had 15 sessions. And at the end of the 15 sessions, they said, hey, you should probably take a pill. Right.
Okay.
And we've talked to other people that have gone through that same thing. And I feel like the current fix for a lot of people is, hey, go take a pill. I'm curious if you've seen that, heard about it. Is that kind of standard, medical process there is just to identify it and then give them a pill to try to fix it, or is there something else that we can do? And I think the Chimney Trail could be the answer.
Okay, so the first thing I'll say is, Stu, thanks for being brave enough to share that you had this experience, because you destigmatize it for a lot of people who might be on the fence as to whether to go get some help. So Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'll say is that I am not qualified to make a recommendation on the benefits or like lack of benefits associated with prescription medication. What I can do is parrot what Dr. Burns, that wrote Feeling Good, would probably say. I can't quote his book exactly, but when your brain is making a new memory or learning a new behavior, like in kids sports, this is a big deal, right? Like learning how to juggle a soccer ball or whatever. The more you do it, you're essentially creating insulation around whatever the thought process is. There's like some neurons and malleation of synapses, like synapses, neurons, malleation of it. And malleation is essentially a word for fiberglass insulation around a particular behavior or thought to like make it so that you can access it more quickly. If you have negative thoughts that you have revisited over and over and over again, they can be as traumatic, maybe even more traumatic than the event itself. So if you're suffering from PTSD or something that you have revisited constantly, you've insulated that negative thought pattern in a way that is going to be very difficult to break free of. So there is like a massive industry that is like being erected right now on like the pharmaceutical science side, and there is a ton of benefits to that. Also, like you're hearing a lot of stuff about like psychedelics now because they also help.
Psilocybins.
Yeah, that's right. They also help to like break that insulation. Like that's fundamentally what the prescriptions and the psychedelics and these alternative treatments are supposed to do. It's like break the malleation that's occurred over this negative thought pattern, right? And then it like changes your vantage point considerably so that you can like revisit, okay, how should I be thinking about it? But I think where we get into trouble, and this is what Dr. Burns would say, is that the idea behind these medications isn't that you just take them indefinitely. The idea is that you take it to break the insulation on a negative thought pattern and then use something like cognitive behavioral therapy and affirmations and all sorts of other things to revisit positive ways of experiencing the trauma that you went through, like productive, like post-traumatic growth sort of ways. And then like you don't need the medication anymore because you already broke the insulation on the bad stuff. Does that make sense?
That's fascinating.
For sure.
I've never heard I've never heard an explanation like that where you can use things hand in hand to, because oftentimes the medication part of it is stigmatized, like, oh, they're just giving me a pill, right? Like even the way Stu framed that,
I framed it very negatively.
much. Well, no, but I think that's a normal. I think that's a normal response, right? Like I think a lot of us are like, but well, especially military. Oh man, I have this injury. I suck it up and I take vitamin M and I take my 100 milligrams of Motrin and I push through, right? Like there's this idea, this stigmatization of taking medication. I've never heard that type of explanation. That's pretty fascinating. So thank you for that. That's we're getting educated today. And I think that, one of the most encouraging things though, for me, and I would tell all of our listeners to go check it out, right? Go check out chimneytrailhealth.com and see what you guys are doing, because it's, again, I love the idea of being proactive, and there's nothing negative in gaining tools that help you with self-awareness, nothing negative in tools that help you with growth. And it, quite frankly, it's an abundance mindset to have the ability to have more. Like I'm even thinking about it for, not that I'm going to be a hack psychologist or anything like that, but I'm, my personal coaching program in our mastermind, thinking just to making people aware that, the cognitive distortions, that's a thing. And now you can go educate yourself on what those are. And you could read something and be like, oh, wow, this is normal. Like they literally have tons of literature. Yeah. Like I'm not unique in my ability to take a very positive thing and paint it negative, right? Like that's not something, a problem. It just helps you to frame it differently, and then to be able to ideally address it well before you get to the position where, like your sailor is out buying a firearm and taking extreme actions, right? And then the other side of that, what really resonated with me as the dad, making sure you maximize, like I want to talk to my kids about this stuff too, right? Like, and we'll talk after about the boxes and the family things that we can do, because there's so many things that you can hack essentially to get this stuff ingrained in your family and give your kids tools that ideally you're never that dad, right? You're never that dad. And because these are not, it's not just, let's go do some mental health stuff, kids. No, it's an adventure box. Like
adventure.
It's fun
Yeah.
stuff, right?
That's it. It's fun. You got it,
It's
David.
fun.
That's it, man.
And so like that is something also that builds memories, and it's advancing your family. And so much awesomeness to it, man. I absolutely love it, Matt. And I love that you're being so proactive and not dealing with the symptoms, and actually doing something about, the root cause, and ideally driving change from that perspective is absolutely fascinating. And I love that you're an academy grad who is very entrepreneurial and doing this as a business as well, and pushing forward from that perspective. So it's very fascinating, man. I love it. Kudos to you. Keep crushing.
Thanks for having me on. I mean, this a great talk. And yeah, I'm happy to be doing it. I did not fancy myself a businessman, but I learned very early that this wasn't going to make it as a nonprofit, because there were some issues working with doctors and stuff in a nonprofit status because of like board conflicts of interest. But every doctor can take a little bit of equity. So yeah, we just were like, all right, let's make it a Delaware-based C Corp and make $1 billion. So we'll take all that money and reinvest it in the problem, and hopefully make it so that our kids don't need to deal with the same challenge, 25 or 30 years from now.
Dude, I love it, man. Well, we're over time. Matt, this is an amazing conversation. I would like to talk like for another hour on this, because I'm like super interested in it. But what you're doing, dude, is like you are making a huge difference in this world. Like you are making a major impact. And David says this all the time. You're not going to know the impacts until you get to heaven, and people are at those pearly gates, saying thank you. So great job, dude. Great job. Thank you for what you're doing. Hey, guys and gals, let's reach out. Let's plug in. Let's take some action steps here. Let's go to chimneytrailhealth.com. Let's plug in. Let's spread this news, spread this message, and hey, let's take uncommon action.
Love it. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys.
Let's go. Let's be friends. Let's go.
Right on. Yeah. I'll drive down there
let's go hang out. Let's go hang out.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
See you
guys.
Man, we have exciting news. We're opening up the next house of the Kinetic Man Mastermind. I tell you, it's the most important hour of the week that I go to, that I attend. I change every single week for the better to become the best husband, the best father, the best friend, and the best leader in our community. This is a time that you can choose to make a major impact in your life. Go to thekineticman.com and sign up. It's an application. It is exclusive. We are looking for the right man to take action and join us to be the hero of their journey. Come join us, thekineticman.com. Do it.
Thank you for listening to the Kinetic Man podcast. If you are growth-minded, community-focused, and willing to take uncommon action to redefine success and live an abundant life, visit our website at www.thekineticman.com to see all the ways we can connect.
And on our website, you can find more information on everything we're doing, like joining our Meetup page to get the details on our webinars and our local Thursday gatherings here in Colorado. From our site, you can also find more information on and sign up for the next Kinetic Man retreat and the next house of our mastermind group. Finally, we always appreciate your love and support. Please share this episode and go rate us on your favorite podcast player of choice.
Thank you again. Now go take uncommon action.